And then the next big assignment, and we've talked about a bunch of different things that you've done, but one of the things, and I always get drawn to things that I know a little bit about or something that I've seen, and I know that you ended up going to Liberia as well. And I was on standby. I was actually off the coast of Liberia in the late 90s when things were just going completely sideways. And I pulled up a little article that captures some of the madness that was going on in Liberia. This is an article from The Guardian by Chris McGreal, which The Guardian's a UK site. A commander in Charles Taylor's militia. So Charles Taylor was this psychotic dictator of Liberia. Militia has told a war crimes trial that the former Liberian president ordered his fighters to eat their enemies, including UN peacekeepers, as a means of terrorizing the population. Joseph Zigzag Marza, chief of operations for Taylor, who is on trial at The Hague, also testified that he oversaw horrific crimes such as cutting the babies out of pregnant women, and that the former president told his men that their enemies are no longer human beings. Taylor, 59, has pled not guilty to 11 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity at a special international court over his collaboration with anti-government rebels in Sierra Leone, which borders Liberia. Marza, this is his chief of operations, who led the death squad of group of killers, said many of the victims of cannibalism were members of the Kron people of the then Liberian president Samuel Doe, who Taylor was attempting to overthrow. But those eaten also included soldiers from UN and West African ECOMOG peacekeeping forces. He said we should eat them. Even the UN white people. He said we could use them as pork to eat, Marza told the court. We ate a few ECOMOG soldiers, but not many. But many were executed, about 68. He said Taylor said eating people set an example for the people to be afraid. Taylor's defense lawyer asked Marza how the fighters would prepare a human being for the pot. The former commander described decapitating, carving up, cleaning, and cooking corpses seasoned with salt and pepper. We slit your throat, butcher you, throw away the head, take the flesh and put it in a pot. Charles Taylor knows that, said Marza. He told the court how rebel leaders who fell out with Taylor met a terrible end. The former commander described dismembering the body of another rebel leader known as Superman and then taking his hand to Taylor, who gave him cigarette money in return. Marza said the pair then cooked up and ate Superman's liver. Marza said that he had killed so many men, women, and children he had lost count. He described drowning and bludgeoning babies to death and murdering women with penknives. He said when he was serving Taylor's rebel National Patriotic Front of Liberia, he had established checkpoints on roads using human intestines and severed heads mounted on sticks. Asked whether Taylor knew about this, Marza replied he was aware. He made us understand that you have to play with human blood so that enemies would be afraid. Asked how he felt about these actions now, Marza said, I regret nothing. Sorry. I apologize. That is our lifetime. That is me. This is me sitting off the coast of Liberia while this was happening. Heinous. It's just sick. And I think, Taylor was overthrown in 2003. Obviously, the country still bears the scars of that kind of darkness and evil. And that's something you talked about earlier, was the fact that your perspective, and this is what I think I find very interesting about your perspective, is that I'm always talking and exploring and studying the point of war, where it's happening. And you end up in these places, maybe you're a day behind, maybe you're a week behind, maybe you're a foot behind, maybe you're a mile behind, but you're seeing what the after effects of war is. And I think that perspective for all of us to know is very important. So, and I know you were there. While you were there, again, you were there in what year? 2012. Yeah. So this is. Yeah. I mean, it's never exactly going to be the most peaceful place in the world, but it was relatively stable compared to when it was under Taylor.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, this is one thing that when we were off the coast of Liberia, and you're looking at the coast. And you can see the coast. I mean, we were literally maybe a couple miles offshore, looking at the coast, and I can see that there's waves breaking. So I'm kind of thinking, I'm a surfer. I'm thinking, hey, those look like good waves. And then you can see there's buildings, nice big kind of hotel. You can see this beautiful white beach. You can see it looks like a just beautiful place. I'm thinking to myself, I need to go here on a surf trip. And then eventually, I'm looking at this for a few hours. We get a little bit closer. I'm starting to make out a little bit more of what I'm looking at, and eventually I get out the big giant optics to study where we might be landing and what's going on there. And when I look through these optics, the whole picture changed, because now you see all these buildings that literally look like big, beautiful, beach. What's a big beach hotel called?
Moana Surf Rider.
Yeah, something like the Moana Surf Rider. These big giant resorts. They look like these big giant resorts. And as I put the big optics on them and started looking, they're just completely gutted. They're destroyed. It's just a nightmare. And it's so horrible to see such a beautiful place just completely destroyed by us, by humans, by fellow human beings, have just completely destroyed it. What did you notice, or what was it like when you were there? Give us a debrief on 2012.
I mean, I just when you're mentioning those hotels, I remember taking a trip out to the beaches and just walking along the beaches for a couple of hours and just looking at these places, thinking, what's going on here? I mean, my overriding it's just that the country was just eviscerated. I mean, and it's still. I was there working for an NGO, and there were certain areas and certain things that they wanted covered, and I had the opportunity on a couple of days to basically just go unilateral and just take a fixer and just go and do my own stuff. And on that particular trip, that's when I actually shot the pictures that I thought were really quite interesting from that. But that was looking at sort of Liberia as a whole, but I was only in Monrovia. But I had this picture of, we traveled down to the River G County and Grand Gedda. Just stunningly beautiful parts of the country. Just ridiculously beautiful. And the sort of the difference between living in the country and maybe living in Monrovia was so tangible. Monrovia the infrastructure has just completely disappeared, and I can't remember the figures, but I just remember being blown away by the fact that the town was built for, say hypothetically, 1 million, and there's something like 5 million living in it. Those figures aren't correct, but it's that sort of scale that was just mind-blowing. And it was such a shame, because it's such a beautiful country. The Liberians are such beautiful people, and yet you had this overriding sense that, are they ever going to escape this? Is this the legacy? Is it going to stay with Liberia? Are they ever going to be able to pull themselves out? They are such a poor country. And I remember looking at areas where money was being spent, and I was asking myself, why are you spending money here? Why are you making the roads outside the mayor's office look pristine when the inside of Monrovia is the state that it is? There's the West Point slum, I think, which is one of the biggest slums there, and I remember walking through that, and I never once felt intimidated. These were just incredibly vibrant places, but the conditions that the people were living in, their version of normality was a camera really couldn't tell that picture. It just couldn't shoot those images to tell that story properly. I think, it's one of those rare times where I've had a camera in my hand. I think I can't tell this story with a camera. I don't know what I can tell it with, but I can't tell it with a camera.
And this is because the conditions were so
dreadful. so dreadful. And I mean, the way Monrovia is built, it's sort of slightly on a hill, and it rains a lot in Liberia. And what happens is the rain falls off the concrete, and when it rains, it really rains, and it creates just torrents, and these torrents just drop off the roads of Monrovia, and they go down into the slums, and they hit the slums before they hit the sea. And these slums are, they flood at certain times of the year, and yet the people they expect it. They know it's going to happen. So I'm spending some time in West Point slum with a young man and his family, and he is a health advisor, and he has 2 daughters, and they both want to be doctors, and he is describing the conditions that they're living in, and what they have to go through every day. And I mean, you can, especially if you're walking through Monrovia, you can see the sanitary conditions and the lavatories. It's beyond belief. It really is. And there are latrines that go straight into the river, and they're just corrugated latrines with a door, and you just go in, and the sewage goes straight into the river, and it's 3 feet away. The kids are just playing around in that river the way our kids would play around in a swimming pool. No idea of what is going through their systems, and of course, when you catch something like dysentery or typhoid, they're one of the biggest killers of kids in Africa. And you look at it and you think, how this is such a vicious circle. How are they ever going to come out of this? How are they ever going to find a way to lift themselves up? Because it's such a poor country, but they sort of make do with the situation that they're in, and then the slum floods, and they say, "Oh yeah, it's going to flood." And although we're 4 feet off the ground and we've got steps coming up to our, it's going to flood and it's going to come in, so we have to just put what we sleep on little stilts, But they're getting up in the morning and stepping into it and coming out, and then they don't have Wellingtons; they just wade their way through it. And this goes on and he said, I was there in August, and he said, well, you should be here in September. This is nothing. And so I was away from, I sort of detached myself from the NGO at the time, and I just went sort of unilateral, and I just wanted to photograph. I just wanted to try in some way to explain what it was I was looking at. And I wasn't shooting it for anyone in mind. I mean, the NGO take all my images. They have access to all my imagery that I shoot, whether I'm shooting it for them or whether I've just gone off piste, so to speak, to shoot. So they get absolutely everything. And I was trying to find a way to document what it was that you could see. And I was really struggling until there was one moment when I was wandering through the flooded slum, and I was up to my knees in sewage as we were walking through between the corrugated huts, and there was a little flash of pink in front of me, and I saw this young girl sort of just go between 2 buildings, and she was carrying a pink umbrella. And I remember thinking, oh, there's another picture I've missed. So I asked the young doctor who was accompanying me through the slum, I said, what's the deal? And he said, oh, she's probably off to church or something, because she's in her Sunday best, effectively, with her perfect little shoes and her skirt and her pink umbrella. So I thought nothing of it, carried on, shot some more pictures, and I thought, actually, I've got quite a lot of stuff here. None of it I was really thinking, this is really strong, And then on the way back to the car, I saw the little flash of pink again in front of me, and it disappeared. And I thought, wow, well, this time I'm not giving up. So I just started to run through this, and you can imagine if you're running through 2 foot of sewage, well, it's not the greatest sight in the world, and you're trying to stop your cameras from going in, and and there's a couple of times that I nearly went head first in, but I was so desperate to try and take a picture of this. And the image I had in my head was when she comes back through that corridor and comes back into this main corridor that I'm in of water, I'm going to just shoot her from behind like a Mary Poppins type of picture. And the contrast for me was this beautiful little girl in this situation, with her pink umbrella, in this horrendous slum situation. And there she was, and by the time she disappeared again, I just thought, this is just really not my day. And then she'd obviously heard me running, and she sort of popped out again and just turned around, and it was almost like a little bank of sand that she was standing on between 2 huts, and there was about a 1.5 foot of water in front of her, and she just turned around and looked at me as if, yes, what do you want? And I just took one picture, and click, and that was it. And the second I took the picture, she just turned on her heels and just walked off and tiptoeing her way. There was me in the middle of this, sewage, but she was finding the delicate way around, just like Mary Poppins would, And I didn't really, and so I thought, okay, I hope that's sharp, because I'm shooting on manual focus lenses, and when you've got one shot at it, you just really hope that you got it sharp, because I have been in that situation where I've had one shot at it before and not got it sharp, and those images haunt me. So I got back to the hotel. The NGO was still working on their TV film that they were doing, and I put it into the laptop and scanned it up, and I looked at it, and I just thought, wow, yeah, that is how I want to remember Liberia. I don't want to remember it as this place that has been eviscerated. I want to remember it for the beauty that it has within its, the beauty of the humanity there. That's what I wanted to show, because I don't want to come away from places and shoot images of people at their expense. That's not me. I think the human race is a majestic species, and if I'm out there and I want to shoot this, I want to show it because it's there. It's everywhere, and you just have to see it. You just see it and you go, that's what a human should look like. And even in the worst conditions imaginable, it's there. And that picture was it for me from Liberia. And that's, I have pictures from Liberia that I keep, but that's the one that I'm really proud of, because it was sharp, thank God. But her beauty in that mess was what I wanted to remember. And it just shows you if it's there, you look for it, it's everywhere. You just have to want to find it. It's easy to just go in there and shoot what's obvious. It's like sometimes you get in a situation like that, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. Mm-hmm. It's there, point your camera, shoot. But you just gotta, if you're looking for it, you'll find it,
Keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah.